Welcome to our This Week in Missouri Politics State of the State edition. We are joined by Representative Aune. Representative, we saw the governor give his final State of the State speech. I want to hear the Democrat response. What do you think?
You know, I think that the most notable thing for me is how many times we were able to stand as a Democratic caucus as opposed to the Republicans. There were many lines that we appreciated in his address, from fully funding the foundation formula to subsidizing childcare for families who are looking to get back into the labor force. There are a lot of priorities that Democrats have been pushing for years that we were thrilled to hear Governor Parson talk about.
It's kind of the stuff he does. I mean, when you actually talk to business owners, not Facebook accounts, actual business owners, they'll tell you child care is a priority. He digs in and actually does the things to help folks work. And it sometimes isn't popular in some parts, especially the Republican Party. But if you say you want to create jobs, there's actually some adult things you do to create jobs.
Absolutely. You make it easier for folks to have jobs, right? And one of the challenges that we're hearing across the state and frankly across the country is that child care is too expensive. It's just one way that we can help families.
If there's one thing you can do as a state, making it easier to work seems to be a good thing that checks a lot of good boxes for the state of Missouri.
Absolutely.
His legacy. I mean, he has a thick legacy. Some of it, my assumption is you weren't a fan of, but it is an amazing set of accomplishments. Maybe nothing bigger than redoing I-70. Did you ever think in your professional lifetime, with a state saying they can't even read the journal in, that you'd see the state redo one of the main arteries of this country?
Honestly, no. And I was thrilled to see that come to fruition. As someone who drives on I-70 every single week to get here to Jefferson City, it's been a priority for the state for so long that it's one of those things where, as a Democrat, I kind of thought it wasn't going to happen, but it did, and I'm grateful for that.
Some of this stuff's going to be interesting. My assumption is you were not a fan of his abortion law. An amazing accomplishment for a person who's ran as pro-life his entire career. But I wonder, even as soon as this fall, maybe that accomplishment won't be viewed as favored by history.
Correct. I think that abortion bans are on the wrong side of history. I think that the further we go in the conversation around abortion access, what we're learning, and what I hope that the general public is learning, is that abortion is healthcare for a lot of women. There are women whose unborn child is not going to make it to term, or whose life is at risk. And we need to make sure that access to abortion is available to every person.
This is just and I always feel a little bit reserved talking about this topic, to be honest with you, just as a guy. But my observation's been this state will vote for pro-life candidates over pro-choice candidates if given the chance, especially in recent elections. However, the current law seems to be a little aggressive for the average Missourian's taste. And I wonder, and Governor Parson signed that law and takes credit for it. I wonder if it's not, maybe it's a different argument. Are you 100% pro-choice, 100% pro-life? But I think the current law may be a little aggressive for most Missourians' temperature.
I agree. I represent a 50-50 district. Yeah. It's very purple. You've been there. And what I hear from voters all the time is it's the extremism part. It went too far. And what the abortion initiative that we are going to be moving, the ballot initiative, the language includes viability. And when you think about the nuances of this conversation, we have some folks in the camp.
There is a ton of nuance to this conversation.
Absolutely. There are folks who want it to be, abortion on demand all the time, is what the far right says. But really what that is late-term abortion for fetuses, again, that will be born stillbirth, or if the life of the mother is at risk. Those are usually the cases of late-term abortions. But there are folks who want it, late-term abortions, and there are folks who want no abortion.
The politics of this was very good for Republicans when Roe versus Wade was the law of the land. The minute that ruling came down, the politics shifted on this.
Absolutely.
And it's, in my estimation, maybe not throughout the entire state, but certainly in districts like yours, abortion is very good politics for Democrats now.
Absolutely. It's like the dog that caught the car, right? They finally got what they wanted, and now they don't know what to do with it.
What if you get what you want?
I think that a lot more Missourians are going to be safer medically, and I think that it's going to be...
But I think the laws of politics will stand. It'll be good for the Republicans, right?
It'll be enshrined in our Constitution. It'll be a much more different fight.
All right. Something tells me there will be some House bills that address even this thing enshrined in the Constitution. Let's talk about this. Right now, Governor Parson leaves office, one of the most accomplished governors in the history of the state, very popular. 2 years from now, when you're doing a budget and you're starting to have to make cuts because of some of these tax cuts, that'll be part of his legacy too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I think has been frustrating about my tenure in the legislature is watching these Republican tax cuts go into effect and affect our state's revenue. I grew up in Kansas. I represent a district in Kansas City that is very close to the Kansas state line. We saw what happened with the Brownback tax cuts in Kansas. I don't want that happening here.
It's like when a politician cuts, they just cut. If a business person cuts, you know, if you're going to cut the revenue of your company in a planned way to accomplish a goal, okay. I wonder if some of these really had the planning in place. And like the last tax cut for the senior, that was a poorly constructed piece of legislation. I'm not even sure it does what they wanted. Some of these things, I wonder, I mean, that'll be part of the governor's legacy as well.
Absolutely. It truly will. And I think that, you know, when we look at the ability to sort of undo what's been done in our tax code, you know, Kansas had to go back in the legislature and raise taxes again. Missouri can't do that. And I think that puts us in a much more difficult position as a state.
So walk me through, though. When you've met Mike Parson, you've worked with Mike Parson. Mm-hmm. He's been governor for 6 years. A truly decent man. Yeah. I think folks you can be on a trip somewhere and say you're from Missouri and know that the leader of your state is a good man.
Yeah. You know, Governor Parson has always been kind to me. And, you know, we're not going to agree on a lot of things, sure, certainly. But he's someone who I can respect for his yeah, approach to wanting to help Missourians and certainly always being kind to legislators, no matter what side of the aisle we sit on.
Let's talk about this abortion IP. Finally, it took you guys long enough. You got your ducks in a row, it looks like. What is going to be the gist of the initiative petition that's put before the voters, I assume in August, mm-hmm, dealing with abortion? Right.
So there were several initiative petitions filed with different language, different levels of at which point will we make the cutoff, essentially. And the one that we landed on due to polling was viability. And like I said, you know, that's because this is such a nuanced issue.
It's going to pass your district, I assume.
It will absolutely pass in my district.
It's going to pass in this state?
Absolutely. I have zero doubt.
Something tells me there are women who would absolutely consider themselves pro-life, yeah, who probably vote for mostly pro-life candidates.
Yes.
That might vote for a well-worded, straightforward, explained initiative petition just because while they are pro-life, maybe they're not quite as pro-life as the law is. That's always, I just think there's a segment of the population, probably predominantly women, that are like, this just feels too far.
Absolutely. And I think that comes from lived experiences,
sure,
right? So many women have dealt with pregnancies that weren't perfect. They've had pregnancies where they've miscarried or they weren't able to carry the baby to term for whatever reason. And those are devastating experiences, but they are life experiences that inform, you know, our policy positions and where we land on the issues. And I think for women who have been in the position where they've needed a DNC post-miscarriage and it was considered a medical abortion in that facility, they didn't realize they were having an abortion, but that's what it was. And so when we restrict that from folks, we're restricting life-saving health care.
You're the more able politician in this state. How did it strike you when the Senate, when Senator Rowden finally stepped up, defended himself, took away the chairmanships of some of the members of this Freedom Caucus? I mean, do you consider the Freedom Caucus your partners as the Democrat minority?
Unfortunately, we kind of do at this point, you know, that the less that happens in the Senate, the better it is for Democrats in Missouri.
I hear some folks on the liberal side say they're not doing anything, and I'm always like, well, if they start doing things, you won't like that well more. It's not, them doing things isn't the answer to you get to happy, right?
Right. It's a truism I talk to my constituents about all the time, that the bummer of serving in the super minority in the legislature is that the less we do, the better it is.
Give me a prediction right now. You'll be one of the leading voices out on the doorstep, not just in your district, but bringing your message to Democrat districts and Democratic candidates around the state. Where do you think you'll end up? Plus how many seats this fall?
Whew, on a good day, I think we could get 9.
Nice.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that minimum we'll get the 3 we need to end the supermajority.
It would be kind of an emotional breakthrough point, right?
It would be huge. Democrats have been in a super minority, and we have felt discounted and forgotten in this state and unheard for too long. It will be an enormous moment.
Well, Representative, thank you for joining us. And later today, of course, go Chiefs, right?
Go Chiefs, absolutely.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel. I'm going to try to get an opinion of Don Mayhew after this.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Missourians know that big futures have small beginnings. That's why over 86% of Missouri voters believe early childhood education is essential to success later in life. While almost every voter agrees expanding access to childcare will attract jobs and help more parents succeed at work. And more than 7 in 10 Missouri voters say improving early childhood education will make our communities safer. Find out how you can help grow Missouri's bright future at mochampionofchildren.com.
Reach your audience with Outreach Studios. Studio 17 offers 1,000 square feet of customizable space that can accommodate roundtable discussions, podcasts, live stream content, and much more. For a different look, we offer View 17. This one-of-a-kind event center is fully wired for broadcast and is perfect for corporate or commercial content. With Outreach Studios, the opportunities are endless. Elevate your message, your brand, and your expectations with Outreach Studios.
We all know puppy mills, cruelty, neglect, and pet store puppies are at high risk for disease, even death. We expect our laws to protect dogs, but now an out-of-state company called Petland is trying to change our state law to enable puppy mill cruelty. We all know it'll hurt the dogs we love. Contact your state legislators. Tell them, protect our dogs. Vote no on the cruelty. Vote no on the harmful puppy mill bill.
Data captured by our state-of-the-art monitors helps us pinpoint the timing and location of severe weather more accurately and respond to trouble more quickly. Ameren, Missouri's investment in smart technologies like this is one way we're improving reliability and restoring power faster than ever. Responding to trouble before trouble hits. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back this week in Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker Panel Time. Representative Don Mayhew, the king of I-44. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Scott.
A little bit further down from him on 44, Representative Melanie Stinnett from Springfield. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
And at the other end of 44, the Prince of St. James himself, Jack Cardetti. Welcome back to the show.
Always good to be with you.
Jack Cardetti, you have written State of the Stage. You've done the messaging before and after. You've been probably at every part of a State of the State you could be. What did you think of the governor's final State of the State?
You know, the governor's final State of the State is so much different than everything else, because what you want to do is you want to recap your accomplishments in office, you know, and the danger in a State of the State speech is you make it a budget speech, right, where you're just spitting out numbers and recommendations, whatever. I thought he did a pretty good job. Obviously, he played up a lot of his accomplishments, but I think the governor's office, this 60 days they just went through preparing the State of the State, preparing the state budget, are some of the hardest 2 months that you'll ever have working in that office.
So that's just all cake, right, for the next year?
Well, and now you get to deal with the legislature. That's the easy part.
So, but I mean, I thought it was nice. It was kind of, you could tell it was his last one.
Yeah.
He owned that throughout. Thanked a lot of folks. Yeah. I didn't see him get too into a bunch of priorities, but I mean, Jack, look at, I know you've always come up with Democrat politics, but if you really think about it, Mike Parson's record, agree or disagree on the policies, I mean, he has a legacy I mean, it's phone book thick.
Yeah, it's interesting because he never ran for this office to begin with, right? And he inherited it in a really odd situation with Greitens sitting down. And I think he's gone through that 6 years, and I think he's very proud of some of the service that he's given. And I thought it was a good speech. And I think the thing that was missing, he did not wade into many of the legislative controversies and bills that are actually going forward this year. He really stuck with accomplishments, and he stuck with budget.
Representative, final State of the State, what'd you think?
You know, I thought he did a great job. I think, as you mentioned, he was presenting what his accomplishments were. You know, obviously giving a nod to Teresa is sure. Always wonderful at the end, but seeing some emotion actually in him a little bit here and there. I think he feels like he's accomplished a lot, and I think he has. It
is. I mean, you start racking up, obviously Kid Bond's kind of the gold standard for Missouri governors, but you got Warren Hearns accomplished a great deal. I mean, the Carnahan record was legitimate. I mean, Mike Parson's record, from the things he's dealt with to how he's leaving the state in pretty good hands. I mean, I think the old sheriff did pretty well. Yeah, and he's had a lot of challenges to deal with. And I think, you know, all of those things built up a leader in our state that I think we can be proud of. I mean, it took him 2 months to clean the sleeves out of the governor's mansion. Representative, I mean, I love you because you just say how the cow ate the cabbage. But I do think objectively, if you step back, if you're the old sheriff and you head back to Bolivar at the end of the year, You can feel like folks may not like the fact there's no abortions, but it's an accomplishment. He's got several accomplishments, tax cuts, to some highway funding, to handling a pandemic. I mean, he's got some things he can be proud of.
Oh, no, he's got a great resume. You got to keep in mind, though, he came in at a pretty controversial time, too. So the list of accomplishments, although he and I might disagree on a few of them in between, the reality is that we were both going the same direction. We knew where point A was and we knew where point B was. I disagreed a little bit on the process, but other than that, he's got a great resume and he's definitely got several things to be proud of.
So, there's a lot of things you talk about. One thing I think folks talk about is I-70 and taking the ARPA money that Missourians are going to have to pay their debt on, right? Every Missourian's going to pay higher taxes so they can pay down the debt. They might as well get their money back. I-70 as an engineer, huge thing for the state. And we'll get to 44, but I mean, that is something. Did you ever think you would see a whole-scale rebuilding of that highway in your lifetime?
Well, no.
I didn't either.
And I'm going to have some, problems with how we finance that thing. It kind of fell out of our normal process when we also took $2.8 billion of general revenue and dedicated to this one project. And I'm an infrastructure guy. I like infrastructure.
But just so the scope and size of the project, I mean, it is an amazing thing to take on for the state. In a time where, I mean, the Senate can barely approve the journal. To get something like that initiated and begun is an accomplishment.
No, absolutely. I would have preferred if we would have dedicated that money to the already identified high priority unfunded needs that we already had in the state, and they were spread all over the state. And, since we are talking about general revenue, that's statewide money, no federal match in this project at all. We're trying to get some, and I have to applaud MoDOT for doing that, for going after some federal money on it. But honestly, we're looking at the next Highway Act before we get significant participation by the feds on this project.
Jack Cardetti, when the governor goes back to Bolivar, I still think 70 is going to be something folks talk about, 10 years after.
Yeah, I think so. It's sort of a transformational project. If you look at where the commerce of Missouri runs through, right? A lot of it is through that I-70 corridor, right? I'm a little, I live in Columbia, so I drive it quite a bit. So I'm thankful of it. Now, the couple of years it's going to take to build it, it'll be an absolute nightmare. But it is something that'll be transformational.
You do wonder what crayon they designed that current interchange with. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But it has made smart too from Pug Policy and Spoon. We're using some one-time money essentially by the Biden administration that's freed up other money, right, for a one-time project, not an ongoing project. That makes sense when you get to actually the nuts and bolts of governing.
I mean, let's be serious for a minute. There's going to be a lot of ribbon cuttings along the middle part of the state for the next 10 years, right? I'm not sure the tax cuts 2 years from now when the state's in a deficit, it's almost like a lottery winner. They're bankrupt 3 years later. I'm not sure how well the abortion legislation will hold up even this fall, right? I'm not sure some of the things. I mean, while it is a thick record of accomplishment, I wonder how history will judge the abortion law. I wonder how history will judge the tax cuts.
Well, yeah, obviously the politics of overturning Roe versus Wade are terrible for Republicans, right?
What's your best scenario?
It's a terrible, and I think they'll pay the price at the polls in November, somewhat in Missouri, but nationally, I think you're really going to see that. I mean, I think if Joe Biden gets reelected, it's going to be because of that issue, and it's going to be because the Republicans can't find a way to beat Donald Trump.
I do think there is something to be said for, some signature accomplishments. But do you worry? It does remind me of a lottery winner, right? You win the lottery, 3 years later they're bankrupt. I wonder if some of these tax, especially maybe the poorly constructed one on the property thing last year, will these tax cuts look as good in real time when you're doing a budget in 2 years as they do maybe in a book about a legacy?
I think those are things we have to continually be thinking about. And as a current legislator, those are things that I have to be considering every day when I'm helping make decisions. And I think we're doing those things.
Tom Mayhew, you think there'll be some folks who be like, why did we do that with that one-time money then? When you got the red pen out in 2 years?
Absolutely. Basically, we started last year with about $4.5 billion in still remaining reserves. And I think the governor mentioned that we left $1.5 billion on the bottom line with this proposed budget. That's a lot of money in reserves that we've been using to plug holes in our current budget. $500 million a year, for instance, on Medicaid expansion alone. That money's going to have to come from somewhere. Now, the good news is with the tax cuts, we have stimulated the economy in Missouri, no doubt about that. And those tax dollars work a lot better in our citizens' pockets than they do in the government's coffers. we're not very efficient with those dollars. So
All right, I
let's let
can't.
them
There's
decide.
no way I could go back to Waynesville if I had Don Mayhew on my show and we didn't talk 44.
Yeah.
Tell me, right now, with what's available and what could be done, what is the best way to improve 44 over the next 5-10 years?
Well, I already mentioned that probably the smarter money would be to take the $2.8 billion and use it throughout the system. But I-44, I appreciate what the governor did yesterday with creating the fund, and we can start dedicating money toward that end, which is more or less the process we've used for the last 60 years for certain. The unfortunate part of that is by the time we get those necessary improvements done, we're all going to be driving flying cars. And they were promised those in the 60s, right? And so
Now that George Jetson's late.
a little bit, but so the other challenge that we've got from transportation side of it is how are we going to fund transportation here in the very near future? I mean, we've got these mandates coming down from Washington, D.C. that we're going to all be driving electric vehicles by 2035. We definitely got to come up with something different than a gas tax in order to fund these.
I mean, they might in
transportation
St. Charles, but they ain't going to drive electric cars in Waynesville, are they?
We're never going to get to that point, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we're going to be making fun of you people if you run around Dixon in an electric car.
Especially in the wintertime, right?
You have become, in a short time, one of the top experts on healthcare. When you start to look forward with healthcare policy in the state, what do folks need to be working about? And do they need to be worried about when those tax cuts kick in, how do you pay for it?
Sure. I think, healthcare reform is a really important topic. It's something that our state can't ignore. I ran on that because in my district, it's a really big economic driver for Springfield. And I think it is in many parts of the state. And so we have to look at true healthcare reform that moves healthcare forward, that gets more people in our healthcare workforce, that protects the patient-physician relationship and makes sure that patients can go to the doctor and get the care that they need. We saw a bill come out quickly from our healthcare reform committee on prior authorizations. Anybody who's interacted with healthcare knows that prior authorization creates a barrier for access to care. And so we're dealing with those issues one by one. Last year we had a bill in that committee about residencies and making sure that our physicians that are graduating from programs in our state can stay in our state. So anything that we can do as a committee, as a legislature, to encourage people to stay in our state, work in our state, and increase access to healthcare, I think is important.
I've always kind of rolled my eye at some of the DEI stuff. I'm like, does that really happen, right? But I have seen in some of the medical schools, take that. Do you not think maybe it's time to start putting a priority on having Missourians go to Missouri medical schools? I mean, you're more apt to go back and live in Waynesville if you get kinfolks in Waynesville.
Yeah.
So maybe UMKC might do better taking that kid from Waynesville and making him a doctor who might come back to Waynesville than checking some box for some woke silliness.
I think right now in our state, we have about 300 graduates in our medical programs who don't have a residency spot potential in Missouri. We graduate about 1,300 of those don't have an option to stay in Missouri. And so we really put a highlight on that last year, increased some of those spots, but we still have work to do.
She's smart. Jack, do you think, though, looking forward, what will Governor Parson be known for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be a lot of the infrastructure stuff. I think I-44, for instance, it's where I-70 was 20 years ago, right? And so 3 governors from now, they're going to be in the same situation. Will they actually rise to the occasion? Will they be able to do something about I-44? I think that'll be interesting. I think that definitely will be some of the legacy. But on the other side, the abortion issue is going to be part of that legacy too, right? Now, obviously, depending on what party you're with, you'll view that in much different ways, but that will be a drastic change that happened in Missouri for public policy during his time.
I think we could be seeing one of the last rural Missouri governors. The Republicans in rural Missouri are just weak. We're very willing to throw our votes away to urban politicians, and we may never get one like Mike Parson that actually cares about rural Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party is becoming, in some ways,
urban.
The leadership is more suburban than ever before, but yet the actual base of the Republican Party is less suburban than it's ever been.
Why are we that weak? I mean, that just seems like a dumb way to operate.
Well, I mean, look, I think when you look at suburban voters, that's where Democrats, if they're going to make inroads in Missouri, just demographically, that's where they're going to make them, right? You look at those voters, they're the same voters that vote for Medicaid expansion. They're the same voters, the suburban Republican voters that vote for marijuana legalization, voted to overturn right to work. So that's the area where if Democrats are ever going to get serious about knocking down these supermajorities, that's where they're going to have to concentrate.
Let's talk about the Senate. You just talked about bills coming out of the House. The Caleb Browden finally, some would say, after 6 years of just constant fighting after the leadership races he won, took some chairmanships away, and the Senate ground to a halt. Do you ever sit over in the House and think, okay, we're passing all these bills, but like to what end, right?
Sure. And there were a lot of questions before session began about what it would look like this year. I repeatedly told people I was optimistic. I don't know that I can continue to say I'm optimistic, but I'm still hopeful. I think that, leaders have to act, and I think we saw some action.
When I think Don Mayhew, hopeful is not the word that jumped to my mind. I mean, you do look over there, and it's like, okay, so you're filibustering gubernatorial appointments that, frankly, Caleb's not Caleb's people.
Right.
He doesn't. I mean, I'm sure he cares, but not any great detail. Yeah. It just did seem like there was nothing left to lose, and he stood up for himself. I think it played pretty well amongst his colleagues.
Sure, and I'm cautiously optimistic, but I am a guy that's a half full, glass half full kind of guy. But
wow, really.
Yeah, but it's usually because there's a hole in the bottom, right? So we've got plenty of time left in the session. Hopefully, cooler heads can prevail, and we can end up starting to get some of the priorities done that the House of Representatives wants to do, which, by the way, are the same as the Senate priorities. And we all had the same 4 things on our campaign literature: babies, guns, smaller government, lower taxes. Let's just focus on that stuff.
Are you hopeful? I'm not hopeful at all.
Oh, I mean,
my German pessimism is at peak.
I didn't study a lot of science, but when you start talking about cell division, mitosis, right? When an organism becomes too big, it starts to divide among itself, and that's what's happened with Republicans. When Republicans had slim majorities, or when Democrats had slim majorities, you have to stick together because there's a common cause to get stuff done. Once a caucus becomes so big, it just naturally fractures,
2.0.
and you've seen the Freedom Caucus take advantage of that. They want change so bad that they're willing for nothing to happen. Which some people are going to look at that very cynically, saying, well, maybe they actually don't want anything to happen. Maybe they are protecting the status quo.
We'll have no more show after a minute. So who won the week?
Governor did, without a doubt. I mean, that was a good farewell speech. And
good man that did a good job by the state.
Absolutely, as one of the best character-wise that have ever served. So.
Who won the week?
Well, I've got a couple of people who know how to clear a field and know how to hold a field on their own, and Alex Riley and Mary Elizabeth Coleman.
Nice. Who won the week?
I think Missouri public school teachers did. You saw the governor come out with a budget recommendation that both Democrats and Republicans really can get behind, where if you're a public school teacher in Missouri, you shouldn't be paid less than $40,000 a year. I think that's something we can all get behind. I think it's a good day for them.
I'm going to say the old editor of the Missouri Times, Caitlin Schauhorn. She's out in California, but still a Michigan fan. She had the best night of her life when Michigan won. I actually have had to become a fan kind of myself just through her. Hope you'll win the week next week by joining us here on This Week in Missouri Politics with Governor Mike Parson.
This Week in Missouri Politics is sponsored by the Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, Ameren, Spire, and the United Electric Cooperative.
Guys, thank you so much for watching the show. I want to tell you about a new thing we're offering. It's the Missouri Times Podcast Network. You'll get this show every week. If you want to listen to it in your car, you don't have time to watch it. You'll get our Show in Missouri podcast, History of Missouri, one county at a time. You'll also get our midweek update. Once a week, I throw up the Facebook Live. We talk politics, usually eat a lunch and discuss politics. You'll get to hear all those things come right to your phone. Subscribe to us on iTunes or Android. Missouri Times Podcast Network. Please join us and subscribe.